Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week is the FabFilter Pro Q3. Yes, this is an update to the Pro Q2. So we have a bunch of new features that have been added by FabFilter that make this even more amazing than it already is. As you'll see, the graphic user interface is it's very, very similar. With just some added features. So when you first open it up, it looks exactly the same with the same toolbar options up here, MIDI learn features, the same phase processing modes, natural phase or linear phase. We'll get into some of the analyzer option differences that are there, but all the output options are the same. The metering options, they've added in a 3 dB for mastering, where you need smaller levels of EQ. You can kind of work with it there with a little bit more resolution. And otherwise, functionally, it will work pretty much the same. You have all the same graphic resize options. You have the full screen mode capabilities. So all of that is pretty much the same. So what is new? What's been added in? All right. So on the primary thing that's been added in is the ability to have a dynamic EQ added in. So if you alt-click on any point in the frequency spectrum, you now either have an upward expander, or if you pull down this, you have a downward compressor. So it gives you that ability, and you'll notice here, if we zoom in on the display here, you'll see that there are some new features that are added into the normal little palette here that's opened up with other stuff. So you can eliminate it just like you always can. You could switch between the different bands like you've always have. You can split it out of stereo. Now one other feature that's been added in is you could actually work on an individual basis, on an individual band by band basis, make it work mid-side versus stereo. Whereas in the Pro Q2, you could only globally make it stereo or globally make it MS. Now you could do it band by band, which makes it kind of an extra kind of cool feature. Otherwise, what it has is an auto threshold settings. You don't have attack and release settings here, but what you have is an auto threshold setting here. And you could see if I pull here on the ring, I can change it to upward expansion or downward compression. I have the overall gain control here, which adjusts and maintains that offset between the two. I can bypass it to make it just so if I have a normal gain here, I can bypass the dynamic portion of it, so I can A/B it quickly there. I can eliminate the dynamic portion of it. There's also the option here which allows you to make it operate more on a proportional Q kind of basis. So as it boosts or attenuates more, it'll narrow the Q as you go along. Otherwise, you have your normal Q adjustments that work, and all the shortcuts that you normally are used to go along with this. So if you hold the Alt key, you can keep your gain, or if you drag up and down, you can maintain the frequency without it shifting. Then you could change the Q by holding the Command key if you're on a Mac. I believe it's Control key if you're on Windows. You can hit the Control key or right-click on to open up the menu options here, so that's available. Now here with the display, in addition to this feature which always existed, allowing you to solo up the band, which is between the two lines that you see, the vertical lines, you also have the ability to select the different filter types. If I switch this off from dynamic here for a second, there's a new Q type here which has been added in, and this is a flat tilt. So what the flat tilt does is it allows you to just go across the full spectrum. Let me zoom out here for a second so you can see the whole thing. It allows you to go across the whole spectrum. So you may be used to the tilt shelf, right, which allows you to operate, this way, where you basically shelve down on one side and up on the other side with a crossover point somewhere in the middle. Same basic idea, only flat. So you got the flat. So that's been added in, which is very cool. If you operate here with the high pass or low pass filter, oops, let me try that. There we go. I think what I have is a Q adjustment here that is a little bit off here. Let me just kind of pull this down here and adjust that back into normal. There's been in addition to this, you see here where you got the 12 dB per octave, so you have all your different order filters. Now they've added a brick wall option, so you can throw that in. So when you need that super sharp filtering, which really works well for a lot of the electronic music where you want sweeping filters, and of course you can automate that. So the brick wall setting, which is very cool. Otherwise, you can go back to your normal order filters and anywhere in between. So that just shows up here. A new addition here, because you have the Q control and frequencies set up there. Now, this is the equivalent of a right click. So there's a little drop down arrow so you can make the band dynamic, invert the gain, change the shape. So if you wanted to go to a bell curve here, then all of those options that allow you to invert the gain, make it a dynamic EQ, and all it changed the shape, the slope, the stereo placement. So you could place this just on the mid, just on the side, the full stereo, just on the left, just on the right. You could split the band, delete it. So most of the options, or all of the options that you pretty much get when you're down here on this little palette here that opens up for each band, are pretty much available to you. So that adds like a whole other quick and easy way to use it if you're just sort of mousing your way through things. Now, in addition to all of these things, there's also some pretty cool features here on this end. One is the ability to actually monitor any other channel up on the frequency display. So, for example, if I just play a little bit of audio here, there's a few new options here. One you'll see here is I have the display, the spectrum display here. You'll see that frequencies are showing up at the peaks. This is a very cool feature because now once you have this up here in frozen, you can find a particular peak. Maybe there's a particular ringing or something like that. And this allows you to just go ahead and just balance that right out if you felt like any of these things were problematic. And then from there, once you let go, then you can kind of adjust it and change the Q and all of that sort of stuff as normal. So that spectrum grab is the feature that they call it, is also like a very cool option. Also from here, in addition, we can also monitor. So like, for example, here I have a rough mix of the same song, and now I could see both. So what you'll see is two displays. The red line is showing me the other any other instantiation of the Pro Q3 is available to show up here. So for example, I can load up the bass track, and if I play this, now I'll see the bass notes sitting here. You'll also notice these red shaded areas that show up here, and this is essentially an option where it's showing you conflicting areas, and that would allow you to go in and grab particular frequencies. This might be handy if you're doing something where you have the kick drum and the bass and you're trying to get the two of them to work together. You may find some very specific conflicting areas and then make your EQ adjustments accordingly. You can also use the EQ match. So, for example, if I just, for whatever reason, wanted to match up from a previous mix the frequency spectrum, I could click on the EQ match, select that particular reference here, and then play a little audio. It'll come up with an EQ curve. And it will come up with an EQ curve that matches along with what I hear. Now, obviously, that's for the purposes of this is not something that I want, so I'll just eliminate this. But that is also available here for matching, and you could use that for mastering purposes, or if you're just trying to match the basic frequency spectrum of some other reference. I happen to just have this on the mix bus. I think you're probably all very familiar with the way that it sounds, so I'm not sure that like doing audio examples here is going to necessarily give you a better idea of how it works. It sounds as good as it ever has. Before as a Pro Q2, and if you're watching this video, you're probably already very familiar with that. The addition of the dynamic EQ is just incredibly powerful. The flat tilt that may come in, handy for some very particular situations where you have either a mix that's extraordinarily dull and or dark sounding, and you want to tilt the frequencies of one spectrum or another. So those types of tools are great additions, especially the dynamic EQ. In addition to all of this, there's also now surround support. So you could have up to Dolby Atmos 7.1.2 for mixing, which gives you the ability. Here I just have a 5.1 track, and you can see here how easy it is for me to put different EQs here, just on the left, just on the right, just on the center, and it also makes a pretty cool looking pattern here. This EQ has nothing to do with anything that's on that track. It's just a blank track. But just to give you an idea of like how you can now split out the bands going out, and so for people who do surround mixing and surround work, this is a great addition. So overall, this is, an amazing update. I was actually very surprised. I've been a big fan of the Pro Q2. They released the original Pro Q, I guess, 1, with going back to 2009. So in that period of time since, they made some extraordinary advances, and this one is no exception. So just a quick update video to give you an idea of what's different and new about the Pro Q3. Again, it's worth it just for the Dynamic EQ Edition, even if you don't use all of those other features, and some of the other workflow enhancements make this an amazing one. It's already probably the best, easily the best graphic user interface to work with. Just the workflow of it, once you get used to it, you could just work with it so quickly and dial sounds in. And now with these added features and the improvements that have been made available to it, just makes it that much better of a buy. All right, there you have it. Quick review, plugin of the week, FabFilter Pro Q3.